shaken yet standing firm. This is Radio Cayman in the Cayman Islands.
For the Record is brought to you by Vamped Motors, the only authorized Ford and Toyota dealership serving the Cayman Islands. And Cayman Pharmacy Group, with locations in West Base and professional pharmacy at CTMH Doctors Hospital. The Cayman Pharmacy Group has a location for you just around the corner.
Coming to you live from Radio Cayman Studio.
For the record.
For the record. For the record.
Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you.
For the record.
Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers.
For the record.
For the record. For the record.
Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orrett Connor.
Good morning. Good morning and welcome to For the Record. Today is Wednesday, the 16th day of January 2019. I trust that everyone had an enjoyable evening, enjoyable night, and that you're all raring to go this morning. I want to thank you, our listening and viewing audience, for allowing Radio Cayman and, by extension, For the Record into your homes, into your vehicles, as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, those busy roads later on. As you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. Of course, For the Record is a show produced by the staff and management of Radio Cayman, and it is geared towards keeping you abreast of issues as they arise and play out on a local, regional, and international scene. I'm your host, Orrett Connor, and you're welcome to join me every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7:30 a.m. until 9:30 a.m. Our phone lines are always open. There is always someone there waiting to take your calls. And you've heard this before, 9 times out of 10. It is that beautiful radio voice of Miss Susan Watson. You can call us on our toll-free number provided courtesy of Flo. That toll-free number is 1-800-534-8255. You can also call us on 949-8037 and 949-6990. Email us at For the Record. That is one word. For the Record at CANDW.KY. WhatsApp us on 925-3261, where we encourage you to send us a text message or leave us a voice note, the contents of which will be played during the course of the show. And of course, you can follow us on Radio Cayman on YouTube simply by subscribing to Radio Cayman live stream. Now, talking about the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, it is our understanding that there has been an accident in the Gun Square area of Bordentown, and as a result of that, traffic is being diverted on to Anton Borden Drive. So if you're coming from the east, you will turn right at the police station, take Anton Borden Drive. Hopefully, there will be police officers at that junction there, which will allow traffic to move much more smoothly once you come out of the road there by the Bordentown Primary School. Otherwise, you're going to see real backup of traffic in that area this morning as well. So again, we urge you to drive carefully, be courteous, bearing in mind that the traffic is going to be slow. We know that many of you are going to be anxious and in a hurry to get to work, but you have to be extremely careful that in your rush to get where you're going, you may end up actually slowing your pace down because you may also have an accident as well. So please be courteous, please be cautious, please be careful on the roads, especially when traffic is going to be moving fairly slowly. Be patient as well. We have no guests in the studio this morning, and there's so many things to talk about and I hope that you will engage in the discussion as well. As many of you would know, the vote on Brexit in the United Kingdom took place yesterday, and the Tories, the government, it's more of a coalition government, but Theresa May's government took a real beating. Out of the 434 votes, 634 votes that were cast, 432 against, and 202, I believe it was, for. I will give you those exact figures again, but anyway, she was resoundingly defeated, and the whole discussion is now what takes place from there. I think this is of interest to the people of the Cayman Islands simply because, as you know, and one of our callers, Mr. Hurston, will tell you, we're a crown colony of the United Kingdom. And what happens in the mother country will affect us in one way or the other. Now, there's a BBC article that was published yesterday, Brexit vote, what just happened and what comes next. Yeah, 432 to 202. Yep, that's correct. Votes in favor. So the article says it was an evening of high stakes and unprecedented drama that will have an impact far beyond the UK. And like I said, it will have an impact here in the Cayman Islands as well. Goes on to say Prime Minister Theresa May's plan for leaving the European Union, the only one on the table, that's the only option on the table was her plan, was voted down by Parliament yesterday. And given the constant stream of analysis and speculation, you could be forgiven for feeling a little overwhelmed by it all. So they go ahead and break it down. What was the vote about? And I think this is important for our audience, those of you who do not follow it, but will hear a lot of talk about Brexit and what it's about. Politicians were voting on the deal that Mrs. May struck with the European Union after more than 2 years of negotiation. And that, of course, came as a result of a referendum as to whether or not to remain within the European Union or to leave the European Union, and the referendum, which was, of course, only carried by about 4 percentage points, but it did carry, right? Says the deal covered some hugely important issues, such as what will happen to the UK citizens living in the EU and how much money the UK would have to pay to leave the European Union. It goes on to say that if the bill had passed, then it would have come into force on the 29th of March, only 73 days later. Simple enough, at least by the standards of Brexit. But one thing we have learned by now is that the course of Brexit rarely runs smoothly. And then it goes on to ask what happened. It says it was the kind of result that Mrs. May will have had nightmares about. Members of Parliament voted by an overwhelming margin of 230 votes to reject the deal. So the margin was by 230 votes. The margin was actually greater than the number of votes for her proposal. Members of Parliament, of those, 118 were from Mrs. May's own Conservative Party. So she had a revolt within her own party as well, and that was expected. It was the largest defeat for a sitting government in history and showed just how unpopular the deal that Theresa May struck was, right? The most controversial sticking point was the issue of the so-called backstop. And we'll go on to explain to you what the backstop is, but it has to do with the Irish border. And it says this is the kind of safety net designed to avoid physical border checks between Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK, and the Republic of Ireland, which is a member of the European Union. I'll repeat that again. So the so-called backstop was a safety net designed to avoid physical border checks between Northern Ireland, right? Northern Ireland, which is a part of the United Kingdom, and you know the history of Northern Ireland and the struggles there against the United Kingdom, and the Republic of Ireland, right? Republic of Ireland, which is an entity within itself, and the Republic of Ireland is a member of the European Union. And why does this matter? It says the defeat is a massive blow for Mrs. May and throws yet more doubt on the Brexit process. The date for Brexit is only 2 and a bit months away, but the UK doesn't appear to be any closer to agreeing how exactly it will leave the EU. And of course, there's talk about hard exit and soft exit and all of those things. Goes on to say that ordinarily such a crushing defeat would be followed by the Prime Minister's resignation. So some of you may ask, why hasn't she resigned? They go on to say, but it's fair to say these are anything but ordinary times. So they go on to prognosticate and to ask what comes next. And it states that the leader of the opposition, Jeremy Corbyn, has tabled, and we saw that as well, what is known as a vote of no confidence in the government. This vote of no confidence lets MPs decide on whether they want the government to continue. It will be held today on Wednesday evening. If Parliament decides that it does not want the government to carry on, then it could trigger a general election. So that a general election is possible. Okay, and they give you the options then as to the vote of no confidence if it is called. If the government wins the vote of no confidence, then the government presses on with its plans, right? If the government loses the vote of no confidence, then is there a clear alternative government, right? So if the government loses, is there an alternative government in place, or clear for one to be in place? If the answer is yes, then May resigns and a new prime minister is appointed, right? If there's a clear government alternative. If there is no clear government alternative, then can any government win a confidence vote within 14 days? Because they have 14 days within which to win a confidence vote. So if they can win a confidence vote, then the government continues perhaps with a modified policy. if there is no government that can be formed after the confidence vote within 14 days, then there will be a general election. So BBC has basically laid out all of the options there. So the end result of all of this, after the vote of no confidence, could result in either the government continuing, perhaps with a modified policy, and hopefully get agreement amongst MPs as to what should be presented again to the European Union to see if they can strike a deal. Or you could end up with a general election. I would speculate that we're likely to end up with a general election because it does not appear as if there's any policy that will be put forward that will garner the amount of votes in Parliament that is needed for this to move forward. We're going to take a commercial break. When we return, the conversation on For the Record will continue, so please stay tuned.
The Cayman Islands boasts of a long, colorful, and rich history. In tribute to our roots, Radio Cayman, the voice of the Cayman Islands, is pleased to bring you the Historical Vignette Series, sponsored by Cayman National Bank. Visit Cayman National Bank today for all of your financial needs. The Cayman Islands, he hath founded it upon the seas. Captain Vincent Garvin, 1917-1995. Captain Vincent Garvin attained the position of Master Mariner at the age of 32. He was a long-time merchant marine captain who provided jobs for many Caymanians and sailed until he was in his 70s. He was married for 50 years to Ernette and Nella Nee Ebanks, and the two had 3 children. He was a loving father and family man who also raised his wife's niece and nephews. Captain Vincent was known for his generosity. He always sent clothing and toys not only to his own children, but to many others in the Mount Pleasant community. He was also respected by his crew for giving to the poor in foreign countries to which he sailed. Tragically, he was murdered only 6 years after retiring from sea.
Radio Cayman's historical facts vignettes are proudly brought to you by Cayman National, with branches on all 3 Cayman Islands. Visit Cayman National Bank today for all of your financial needs.
It's more than what we do. It's who we are. We were your official bank of the quincentennial celebrations in 2003. We were your Bank of the Year 4 times. We were voted as the inaugural top employer in 2010. We were the inaugural Business of the Year awardee in 2017. Who are we? We are Cayman National, your local bank, proudly serving you for over 40 years. It's because of you that our journey continues.
CTMH Doctors Hospital Pharmacy, formerly known as Professional Pharmacy, would like to thank the Cayman communities for their loyal support these past 18 years. Our staff work towards healthcare excellence and providing the most current and up-to-date training with pharmaceutical care. Thorough background checks and follow-up consultations is only the beginning. Your safety is our concern. Our staff are respected healthcare professionals whose job requires careful and precise calculations. Thank you for being a part of our family and for choosing CTMH Doctors Hospital Pharmacy, where we prepare to provide exceptional care. At CTMH Doctors Hospital Pharmacy, we care about your health.
It's 2019, and you know what they say, new year, new me.
Yeah, Bobo. For me, it's new year, new car.
For real? What you thinking of buying?
The new RAV4 from Vant Motors. It's one of the safest compact SUVs out there with enough room inside, which is good for my family and convincing my wife we need this. Plus, it's fuel efficient, fun to drive, and on top of that, it's on sale too.
Yeah, and I hear it's one of the best-selling SUVs on the market.
Cause you don't gotta spend more to do more. That's why I'm gonna get mine now, while they have a new stock to select from.
Do Do more in your RAV4. Save thousands on the all-new 2019 RAV4. Test drive yours today and see why the RAV4 is a best-selling SUV in Cayman. Available only at Vamped Motors,
Beach
Walkers
Cafe
Road.
in the Fall Center on the West Bay Road is a sponsor of Radio Cayman CI Retro Talk Today special Cayman Islands historical and cultural program series. Each Cafe celebrating 30 years of being Cayman's #1 breakfast location, offering you your best choice for a hearty, healthy, delicious breakfast. Each Cafe, friendly service, pocketbook-friendly prices, and a pleasant surrounding. Each Cafe, 30 years in Cayman. You can catch the NFL playoffs all month long right here on Big Screen TV.
Cayman's cruise tourism is not at risk.
Not at risk. Not at risk if we do not build the piers.
This is according to the Vice President of Carnival Cruise Lines.
The vast majority of cruise ships will continue to be smaller ships that will tender for the foreseeable future.
Of the 22 ships on order by Carnival Cruise Lines, only three are mega-class ships
destined for the Caribbean.
It is also a fact that the fourth largest mega ship in the world, the MSC Margavalia, will call on Cayman from October 2019 by tender.
By tender.
Cayman's thriving cruise sector has grown steadily by 14%.
We will not lose any current revenue without the piers.
But we may jeopardize our stay-over tourism, which generates 76% of our tourism revenue.
Is a cruise pier really needed?
There are currently too many unanswered questions.
Our government must get this right for us now and future generations. Make an informed decision. It's your constitutional right.
It is your constitutional right. Sign the petition, support the referendum, and let's build our future together.
System 1 loaded.
1-800-534-8255. What is on your mind when it comes to the government, independence, and the opposition? Issues that matter to you. 1-800-534-8255. Waiting to hear from you. For the Record with your host, Orrett Connor.
Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I have no guest in the studio with me this morning, and I'm trying to enlighten you as much as I can with the assistance of the news article in the BBC about the Brexit situation. So I'm trying to do my best with it based on what's here and my understanding of it as well. And I want to remind you out there, I'm sure many of you have your radios tuned in to 89.9 FM Radio Cayman, that traffic is going to be slow coming from the eastern districts because there is an accident in the Bordentown area, Gun Square area. And when we last heard, traffic was still being diverted from the main road in Bordentown to Anton Borden Drive. That is making a right turn if you're coming from the east at the police station and coming out on the other side of Shamrock Road. So we talked about the backstop, and I just want to remind you that with the Brexit deal that is in place, the United Kingdom is likely to no longer be a part of the European Union, the customs union. So there will have to be border checks. Now, because Northern Ireland is a part of the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland, they border each other, what would happen is that any movement between Northern Ireland, which is a part of the UK, and the Republic of Ireland would be subject to checks as well. And they were trying to avoid that situation. So that's what the Irish backstop is all about. Okay. So the article goes on to say, if, as many analysts predict, Mrs. May survives the vote, then she says she will present Parliament with a different Brexit plan on Monday. And that was one of the options that we said there. If she survives the vote of no confidence, that means the government then, comes with another plan. Also, the way that the coalition is ruling now, I think it's called supply and support or support and supply. I may have it intersploosed wrongly, but they have pledged that they will continue to support the government. So the coalition basically will remain intact. It says, but at this stage, there is no sense at all about another plan about what another plan would look like. If Parliament doesn't change its mind, then there are a few different possibilities. If nothing else happens, it will be a no-deal Brexit. This means, as you might expect, the United Kingdom leaving on the 29th of March without a formal agreement. This would mean no transition period and a sudden rupture of UK-EU relations. And then they give you a quick guide on what is a no-deal Brexit. A no-deal Brexit is where the UK would cut all ties with the European Union overnight. Theresa May's government and many others believe this would be hugely damaging and want a more gradual withdrawal. But if Parliament can't agree on that and nothing else takes its place, the UK will leave without a deal. This would mean the UK would not have to obey EU rules. Instead, it would need to follow World Trade Organization terms on trade. Many businesses would see new taxes on exports and services, which are likely to increase their operating costs. This means the price of some goods in the UK shops will go up. Well, lucky for us, most of our trade is with the United States in terms of goods, so I'm not sure what the effect will be there, but could possibly be a knock-on effect as well. It says the UK would also lose the trade agreements it has with other countries as a member of the EU, all of which would need to be negotiated alongside the new agreements with the EU itself. So it would have to renegotiate with each member state of the European Union separately new trade agreements. Manufacturers in the UK expect to face delays in components coming across the border. The UK would be free to set its own immigration controls. However, some UK professionals working in the EU and the UK and UK expats could face uncertainty until their status was clarified. The European Commission has said that even in a no-deal scenario, UK travelers won't need a visa for short visits up to 90 days. So those of you in the Cayman Islands, if there's a no-deal Brexit, you will be able to travel without a visa to the European Union for a period of up to 90 days. It says the border between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic, which I spoke about earlier, would become an external frontier for the EU with customs and immigration controls, though how and when and where the checks would be made is not clear. Again, because that is the Republic of Ireland would still be a part of the EU, while Northern Ireland part of the UK, and as such, border controls. Says some Leave supporters think that leaving without a deal would be positive if the right preparations were made. They say criticism is scaremongering and any short-term pain would be for long-term gain. But critics, including both Brexit supporters and opponents, say that leaving without a deal would be a disaster for the UK, driving up food prices, leading to shortages of goods, and gridlock on some roads in the southeast resulting from the extra border checks. And again, that's extra border checks with Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland as well. It says the government could also propose to negotiate a brand new deal, although this may mean asking for some extra time from the European Union. And I believe that the European Union has already indicated that they would be prepared to give extra time, and which means that Article 50 would not necessarily kick in as immediately as was anticipated. Say there could also be another referendum, which would also likely mean asking for more time, or Mrs. May could decide that a general election is the best way to end the stalemate. Either way, the UK is uncertain, is in uncharted territory, and the Brexit clock is ticking. We have to go to our 8 o'clock news. When we return, I'll have some final comments on that in relation to a second referendum. And then we're going to go to the Trade Winds newspaper. And if Craig Merrin makes it here in time, we have another magazine, Caymanian magazine, that we will look into as well. No longer in existence, but gives us a lot of history of the Cayman Islands. Please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back immediately after the 8 o'clock news.
Thank you, Mr. Connor. And studio time now is 8:01. Time check brought to you by Price Right.
Price Right is Grand Cayman's warehouse shopping superstore, making your dollar go further with huge savings and no membership fees. Get more of the things you use every day at the right price. But it's not just grocery and health and beauty. Price Right has a full range of products from office to automotive, patio furnishings to kitchen appliances, and even electronics. And since warehouse prices mean savings for you, everything is priced right at Price Right, Grand Cayman's warehouse shopping superstore.
Access and information.
Your community. News and information. Radio Cayman is your choice, your voice for today's biggest news.
Radio Cayman.
With your latest news, I'm Carsley Fuller. A woman enters a guilty plea to a single count of obtaining property by deception after she sold a man's car that didn't belong to her. Vanessa Scott Carnegie admitted selling a 2004 Honda Fit to a man for $2,000, even though she knew the car was not hers to sell. She was released on bail and is expected to return to court in February. The Maritime Authority of the Cayman Islands, along with the Ministry of Education, are now accepting applications for the annual Maritime Scholarship, which covers a wide variety of opportunities, including naval architecture, marine engineering, maritime administration, and nautical studies. Kayla Martin is a past recipient of the Maritime Scholarship.
The scholarship definitely did benefit me. I was able to study abroad, which I feel not only gave me the opportunity to enhance my education, but I also learned a lot of invaluable life skills and, how to be independent, and I got to travel, of course, and all that sort of stuff. So it was definitely a great opportunity.
Consideration will be given to undergraduate, postgraduate, or professional qualifications. The deadline to apply is January 21st. Check out www.cishipping.com for more information. And a few extra hands are needed for the largest and longest-running event for Cayman Islands Tourism Association, Taste of Cayman.
We're welcoming anyone who hasn't yet signed up, who is interested in participating and helping us out to do so. Persons can go to the website, tasteofcayman.org, or phone the organizing team at 623-6700.
CITA's Executive Director Tiffany Dixon-Ebanks says there are important roles to fill on the night. The event is January 26th at 5 p.m. until midnight at Caymana Bay's Festival Green, which brings Cayman's favorite restaurants and bars together for one night, with each vendor showcasing their best food and drink to around 5,000 festival goers. In regional news, the Trinidad and Tobago Loop is reporting that the country has retained its spot as the fifth most powerful passport in the region. According to the 2019 Henley Passport Index, it holds the position at 30, offering visa-free travel to 148 countries. Barbados still reigns as the most powerful passport in the region, ranking at number 24, but is down a few spots from 2018 when it ranked at 21. The Bahamas has also slipped a few spots, ranking at 26, down a few spots from 2018 when it ranked at 23rd. Now with a check of international news, here's the BBC, who will take us out of the newscast. I'm Carsley Fuller from Radio Cayman's newsroom.
BBC News with David Harper. The German Chancellor Angela Merkel has said it's up to Britain to outline its next steps over Brexit, following the British Parliament's overwhelming rejection of the draft deal on leaving the European Union. She said there was still time to negotiate. Earlier, the EU's chief negotiator, Michel Barnier, warned the risk of Britain leaving the EU without agreement has never been higher. The president of Kenya says 700 people were rescued from the luxury hotel and office complex in Nairobi, stormed by Islamist militants on Tuesday. He said 14 innocent people were killed. Uhuru Kenyatta appeared on national television to announce that the security operation, which lasted 19 hours, was over. He said all the attackers had been eliminated. Police in Zimbabwe have arrested the prominent activist Pastor Ivan Muwarire. He was taken from his home in the capital Harare after calling for a stay-at-home protest against the government. Many shops and schools are closed on the third day of protests sparked by a steep rise in fuel costs. Police in Israel have arrested a top lawyer as part of an investigation into claims that judicial appointments have been traded for sexual favours. Israel's Chief Justice and Justice Minister are expected to be summoned to give testimony, as are all members of the Judicial Appointments Committee. The Indian government says a record number of Muslim women have applied to go to Mecca this year to perform the annual Hajj pilgrimage without being accompanied by a male guardian. The Minorities Affairs Minister, Mukhtar Abbas Naqvi, said 2,340 Indian women will travel independently to Saudi Arabia. The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said Moscow and Tokyo are far from being partners because of a decades-old dispute over the Kuril Islands. The 4 strategic islands, which are just 10 kilometres from Japan's Hokkaido Island, were seized by the Soviet Army. BBC News.
Access.
What's happening in your community? News and information, music and more. You can find us. www.radiocayman.gov.ky. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Radio Cayman is your choice, your voice for today's biggest news.
Radio Cayman.
Radio Cayman's premier health show,
For the Health of It, with Tara Bush,
is brought to you on Saturdays at 9:30 a.m. and Wednesdays at 7 p.m. on 89.9 and 93.9 FM. Proudly brought to you by the Cayman Islands Civil Service Association. For more information on how you can become a member or the benefits of the CICSA, please visit www.cicsa.ky. For your convenience, the CICSA offices are open on Mondays from 9 to 12 p.m. and Thursdays from 1 to 4 p.m.
For the Health of It, with Tara Bush.
If you are seeking a bachelor's, master's, or doctorate degree, the Ministry of Education is now accepting applications for the 2019 Overseas Scholarships. Give yourself the education you deserve and apply today. All scholarship applications must be submitted by January 31st, 2019. For more information on scholarships and the application process, kindly visit education.gov.ky.
In financial news, world shares were mostly higher today as investors shrugged off the parliamentary defeat of British Prime Minister Theresa May's plan for leaving the European Union. Keeping score in Europe, Germany's DAX rose 0.1% to 10,899, and France's CAC 40 added 0.3% to 4,802. Britain's FTSE 100 sank 0.4% to 6,869. Wall Street was positioned for gains, with Dow futures up 0.3% at 24,064, and broader S&P 500 futures gaining 0.3% to 2,614. Looking at Asia's day, Japan's Nikkei 225 index, weighed down by weak machinery orders in December, slipped 0.6% to 20,442. South Korea's Kospi added 0.4% to 2,106, and Hong Kong's Hang Seng rose 0.3% to 26,902. In energy, benchmark U.S. crude oil picked up 19 cents to $52.30 per barrel in electronic trading on the New York Mercantile Exchange. The contract added $1.60 to settle at $52.11 per barrel on Tuesday. Brent crude, the international standard, rose 30 cents to $60.94. It gained $1.65 to $60.64 a barrel in London. And in currencies, the dollar slipped to 108.59 yen from 108.69 late Tuesday. The euro rose to 1.1418 from 1.1413, while the British pound rose to 1.2892 from 1.2859.
Kick back at the Cayman Creperie this Friday with some Bubbles and Blues. Bubbles and Blues. There's something different in Georgetown's waterfront. Bubbles and Blues. Sip some bubbly with the serenading sounds of the blues with a mighty fine view. Bubbles and Blues, starting at 5 p.m. Donate and get a complimentary glass of bubbles and enter into the amazing raffle. Bubbles and Blues, a pop-up event in support of NCVO. The Cayman Creperie this Friday, starting at 5 p.m. Bubbles and Blues. Bubbles and Blues.
That's a good morning time now for the latest weather report. Current temperature is 77 degrees. Relative humidity is 93%. Barometric pressure 30.06 inches and rising. The wind is out of the north at 9 knots. Overnight low temperature was 75 degrees. Synopses indicate moderate northeasterly winds and seas will continue across the Cayman area for the next 24 hours in association with a high-pressure system over the southeast United States. Isolated showers are also expected mainly this morning, with a gradual decrease by this evening. Radar images show scattered showers over the Cayman area moving towards the south. Forecast is calling for today partly cloudy skies with cloudy spells and a 40% chance of morning showers, and temperatures will be in the low 80s. Kind of little cool temperatures. Winds will be northeasterly at 10 to 15 knots, and seas will be slight to moderate with wave heights of 2 to 4 feet. Tonight, partly cloudy skies with a 30% chance of late night showers, and temperatures falling to the low 70s tonight. Your winds will be north to northeast 10 to 15 knots. Seas will be slight to moderate with wave heights of 2 to 4 feet. High tide will be this morning at 9:58, low tide this afternoon at 3:55, and a high tide again tonight at 8 minutes past 9. Sun will set this evening at 7 minutes past 6 and will rise tomorrow morning at 3 minutes after 7. And the outlook is calling for similar weather conditions through Friday morning. Good morning once again. Let's get right to it. Busy traffic coming from the east as you approach the Tomlinson roundabout and also past the Tomlinson roundabout. Traffic is heavy. There was an accident earlier this morning in the Boddentown area at Gun Square. Traffic is being diverted on Anton Bodden Drive, just across the Boddentown police station. So that might be adding to the traffic delays this morning. So extra patience needed this morning as you head on down to Georgetown. Heavy traffic on Linford Pearson Highway and steady traffic coming off of Bobby Thompson Way. Also, traffic is busy in some sections, other sections of Crew Road. Steady traffic on Godfrey Nixon Way, and on Eastern Avenue, traffic is moderate. In and out of Georgetown on Shedden Road, not looking too bad as traffic is flowing pretty good. On the West Bay Road heading to Georgetown, traffic is steady. And from the Georgetown area on the West Bay Road, traffic heading towards the West Bay area, light to moderate. And light to moderate traffic flow as well coming from the West Bay four-way stop. On Edward Street in front of the Georgetown Post Office, traffic is moderate. And on North Sound Road, moderate flow of traffic. That's very latest on your traffic. Join us again at about 10 minutes after 12. We'll update you traffic-wise. Have a good morning and extra patience. Buckle up.
Did you know that recycling collection containers are located island-wide on Grand Cayman? The Department of Environmental Health's program is an integral part of DEH's waste management responsibility in the Cayman Islands. Start your recycling program at home today. Put your type 1 and 2 plastics in appropriate DEH recycling containers at all Foster's supermarkets, Kirk Market, or Hurley's Grand Harbor. Please keep the Cayman Islands clean. Reduce, reuse, and recycle. For more information about recycling, go to www.deh.gov.ky.
Hi, I'm Colin Lumsden, the Georgetown Manager and Head of the Revitalization Initiative. Our capital city is the heart of business activities in the Cayman Islands, and we would like to bring it back as a center of social activities, with street-side cafes, green spaces, improved roads, and proper walkways for interconnectivity. The new cruise and cargo port is part of the plan, and will allow for operators to meet passengers dockside with less lines and overcrowding. Cargo operations will be less intrusive. There will be pedestrianized areas for people to safely walk, shop, and dine. Modernizing the cruise and cargo port is a key element in the efforts to revitalizing our capital city.
St. Ignatius Catholic School claims the 2018 Dart Under 13 Boys High School Football League Championships. Radio Cayman's Dion Anglin has the details.
In the Dart Under-13 Boys League, St. Ignatius Catholic claimed their first high school championship by the narrowest of margins as they slipped by Triple C 2-1 in a game that was replayed following a postponement early in the season. With the win, St. Ignatius Catholic edged out runners-up Clifton Hunter High School by a single point, as Clifton Hunter secured second place with a 5-0 win over John Gray High School in a replay of a game that was also postponed early in the season. St. Ignatius Catholic secured the Dart Under-13 Boys title undefeated, tallying 17 points from 5 wins and 2 draws, while Clifton Hunter finished on 16 points from 5 wins, 1 draw and 1 loss. In what could be a first in local football, Cayman Prep High School claimed third place in the competition after a flip of a coin decided the third and fourth places. Cayman Prep and High School and Triple C finished the season with identical records in all categories: number of points, games won, drawn and lost, as well as goals scored, goals conceded and goal differences. The head-to-head clash was a 1-1 draw. Reporting for Radio Cayman Sports, I'm Dion Anglin.
And in international tennis news, Britain's Dan Evans succumbed in 3 sets after pushing defending champion Roger Federer hard in an entertaining Australian Open second-round match. Evans, ranked 189th in the world, lost 7-6, 7-5, 7-6, 7-3, 6-3 against the 20-time Grand Slam champion. But he never looked out of his depth, impressing the Ron Laver Arena with his shot-making. Federer will play Taylor Fritz in the third round after the American dispatched France's Galmon-Villes.
Continue the Caymanian tradition.
Let Korab keep my ground so clean.
The heart and soul of the Cayman people. Thank you for keeping the culture alive.
Read the news every day. From East End to Georgetown, down into West Bay.
Radio Cayman in the Cayman Islands.
Initiating system.
For information that matter. For the record. With Orrett Connor. Continues right now on Radio Cayman.
Good morning and welcome back to For the Records. There are no guests in the studio with me this morning and many things to discuss. I've been doing all of the talking so far, and I'm more than happy and prepared to continue to do the talking. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Brexit vote of no confidence for those of you who have an interest in that. And after that, I'm going to switch gears and then I'm going to go to the Tradewinds newspaper of the 4th of February, 1965. In that newspaper, the budget speech that was made by the administrator, and there's talk about the introduction of motor vehicle insurance in the Cayman Islands, an interesting article by Mr. Warren Connolly, then a member of the Legislative Assembly, talking about constitutional changes. And of course, Mr. Warren Connolly was a strong proponent of internal self-government. The introduction of the PRO that I spoke about on Monday, Public Relations Officer, I refer to that person basically as being the government's spin doctor of the day, and that was Mr. Ernest O'Panton. When he retired as an assistant administrator, then he became the government PRO. So we're going to talk about those things. But let's go to our vote of no confidence in what happened yesterday in the UK Parliament. And this is an article by The Guardian newspaper, highly respected newspaper as well. Some people feel a little bit left-wingish, but, you get good information from them. So I've done some articles from the BBC. This one is from The Guardian. And those of you who are interested in it, you can basically Google and read what's happening there. So The Guardian says that after Theresa May's huge defeat over the Brexit deal, Parliament and the country face an uncertain next few days. On Wednesday, which is today, a no-confidence motion in the government will be debated. If the government loses, there could be a general election. But even if she defeats the motion, the Prime Minister's next steps are hazardous. And the question is, why will there be a no-confidence vote? Says immediately after she lost the Brexit deal, and those of you who watched it would have seen this, by a vote of 230 votes, by the number of 230 votes, May said that such was the quote-unquote scale and importance of the defeat that she would give time for such a motion if tabled by Labour or even one tabled by a smaller opposition party. Of course, Jeremy Corbyn immediately confirmed Labour would do so. Now, what is the procedure for a vote of no confidence? And The Guardian says this will be the first such debate under the 2011 Fixed Term Parliaments Act, which seeks, this is the act now, the act seeks to keep government to 5-year terms by removing the previous ability of prime ministers to call an election whenever they wanted. So fixed term, just like how we have here in the Cayman Islands, fixed term, for 4-year period. In the UK, fixed 5-year terms, and that was put in place by the 2011 Fixed Term Parliaments Act in the UK. Goes on to say there are 2 exceptions. The first, which was used to trigger the 2017 election, happens if 2/3 or more of members of parliament vote for an election. The other method comes if a specifically worded no confidence motion is passed. Goes on to say that Section 2.4 of the Act says that the motion must say that this House has no confidence in Her Majesty's government. And under parliamentary convention, if the official opposition tables this, the expectation is that ministers will allow time for it promptly, and which all of the indications are that that will happen. So what will happen today? When the 2017 election was called, the debate was only 90 minutes long. However, the Leader of the Commons, Andrea Leadsom, said the entire day of Wednesday until 7 p.m. would be used after Prime Minister's question is over at about 12:45 p.m. There will then be a vote, so sometime in the afternoon. What happens if the Labour Party wins the vote of no confidence? There would not be an immediate election if that were to happen. Instead, there would be a period of 14 calendar days, and you heard that referred to in the BBC article as well. There will be a period of 14 calendar days in which the government can seek to regain the confidence of MPs, or else another government can be formed. If this does not happen, then Parliament will be dissolved with the standard 25 working day gap needed before elections are held. So 2 scenarios if Labour wins, right? If Labour wins, Parliament will be dissolved with the standard 25 working days gap needed before a general election, or there would be a period of 14 calendar days in which the government, call it a cooling down period or whatever, can seek to regain the confidence of MPs. Highly unlikely that will happen when you consider the rift that exists within the Tories, that is the Conservative Party. That is likely unlikely to happen. Then the question is, so 25 working days, and then goes on to say the Act does not state precisely what can happen in this period, that is the 25-day period. And since the provision has not yet been used, it remains unclear how, if at all, this grace period could potentially be used to form a very different government, for example, a coalition or a minority Labour administration. So, again, they're into uncharted territory because it has never been done before. Remember now, this is an act that was only put in place in 2011, the Fixed Term Parliamentary Act. So these things are new. Then the question is, will Labour win? And the Guardian newspaper points out that the signs point to the fact that Labour will not win the no confidence vote. However, many Conservative MPs dislike May's Brexit plan. They are not keen on an election and even less keen on potentially allowing a Labour government into number 10. Thus, very few, if any, are likely to vote with Corbyn. So despite the fact that they voted against the Brexit deal that was tabled in the UK Parliament, and 118 of her party members voted against her, they're not likely to vote against her in such numbers in a vote of no confidence. Says on just as crucially, May's DUP coalition partners, one of her main coalition partners, who voted against the Brexit deal, immediately pledged that they would back the Prime Minister in a confidence vote. Now, if you're confused about this whole thing, what do you think I am reading it? But we understand what is happening. They can't live with May, but they can't live without her either. That's the old time saying, can't live with her, but can't live without her. Says if May holds on, what will her next step be? Says she begins to dance around some form of plan B. May said she would immediately start talks with both Tories and people in other parties in a constructive spirit to seek a deal that would win the support of the Commons. Any ideas must be genuinely negotiable and have sufficient support in this House, she said, in a warning to MPs hoping to push a personal or unrealistic Brexit vision. May must present a motion in neutral terms to the Commons by Monday. This could be amended, meaning, in theory, backbenchers with their own ideas could try to seize control of the process. Much will depend on whether the Speaker, John Burkhoff, allows such intervention. So, the intrigue continues, the uncertainty continues, and all that I can say to you is follow it closely, wait and see what happens, but follow it very closely, because while we are thousands of miles away, it could definitely have some impact here in the Cayman Islands, including if there's a change of government in the UK, what could possibly be the results of our recent constitutional negotiations and those additional responses that we're still waiting to hear from the UK on some points there. If it changes to, say, a Labour government, if there's a new election and Labour wins, that could impact us as well. So we just have to wait and see. We're going to take a commercial break now. When we return, we're going to the trade winds, 4th of February, 1965.
It's 2019, and you know what they say, new year, new me?
Yeah, Bobo. For me, it's new year, new car.
For real? What you thinking of buying?
The new RAV4 from Avant Motors. It's one of the safest compact SUVs out there with enough room inside, which is good for my family and convincing my wife we need this. Plus, it's fuel efficient, fun to drive, and on top of that, it's on sale too.
Yeah, and I hear it's one of the best-selling SUVs on the market.
Cause you don't gotta spend more to do more. That's why I'm gonna get mine now, while they have a new stock to select from.
Do Do more in your RAV4. Save thousands on the all-new 2019 RAV4. Test drive yours today and see why the RAV4 is a best-selling SUV in Cayman. Available only at Vamped Motors, Walkers Road.
Flowers Bottled Water is a sponsor of Radio Cayman's CI Retro Talk Today, special Cayman Islands historical program series. Flowers Bottled Water, the cooler of water. Telephone 949-8688. The next CI Retro Talk Today special program presentation comes your way on Thursday, January the 17th at 12:15 p.m. on Radio Cayman.
The Tuesday and Thursday edition of The Business Buzz is brought to you by Cayman Medical Supplies, providing quality pharmaceuticals, medical supplies, and consumer products to healthcare providers, retailers, and ultimately the patients at a reasonable rate in a friendly, caring, and timely manner. Cayman Medical Supplies is located at number 93 Smith Road, Windward Center. Telephone 949-6211.
System 1 loaded.
1-800-534-8255. What is on your mind when it comes to the government, independence, and the opposition? Issues that matter to you. 1-800-534-8255. Waiting to hear from you. For the Record, with your host, Orrett Connor.
Good morning and welcome to For the Record. It's my pleasure, and I promised you that we would try to follow the history of the Cayman Islands by following some of our older publications and newspapers. One, the Trade Winds newspaper, started by Mr. Billy Borden with the support of Mr. Arthur Borden, Mr. James MacDonald, a Canadian lawyer who was here. I think Mr. Stanley Panton was involved in it as well, but the seed money for the start of the newspaper and its continued operation was provided by Mr. Borden and Mr. MacDonald. Budget speech made by the administrator in February of 1968, and the Trade Winds tried to publish as much of it as they possibly could, but couldn't do it all in one publication. But the administrator is quoted as saying, "Ladies and gentlemen of this Honorable Legislative Assembly of the Cayman Islands, it is my privilege today to deliver the first budget address since I was appointed administrator of the Cayman Islands for a period of 2 years. On my arrival in these islands just 12 months ago, I publicly expressed the intention of doing everything within my power to protect and to advance the interests of the people of the Cayman Islands. I have endeavored and will continue to endeavor to live up to this undertaking by doing those things which, without fear or favor, I consider are in the best interests of all. It is necessary to emphasize, however, that I shall continue to seek to need more and yet more advice and assistance from the members of this Legislative Assembly, on whose shoulders the burden of responsibility increases annually in proportion to our social, economic, and constitutional progress. Politically, the year 1964 was a quiet one, and party maneuvers were, for one reason or another, kept to a minimum. Any bitterness which existed between the two parties some years ago has obviously been replaced by a healthy and vigorous but more mature rivalry, which adds interest to the cut and thrust of debate in this assembly. Many such debates took place last year, and if the row upon row of empty seats in the public gallery of this assembly were anything to go by, then little public interest was shown in the deliberations of this House. And I'm going to pause there for a second and just interject and say the same could be said to today's Legislative Assembly unless there is a state opening or sometimes a budget speech. The public gallery in the Legislative Assembly is relatively empty. But fortunate for us these days, we have Radio Cayman, which carries the proceedings of the Legislative Assembly live, and also it is played back at night, so you get to follow the proceedings of the Legislative Assembly. How far we have come since 1964. Okay, so I will continue. It goes on to say the Legislative Assembly dealt with a considerable volume of legislation in 1964, and no less than 24 laws received assent. Amendments were also made to the Cayman Islands Lighthouse Law, the Tax Collection and Internal Revenue Law, and to the Tariff Law. The object of these amendments were threefold. First, to reduce the cost of certain basic foods by removing or by reducing import duties in order to assist the poorer, and very often the elderly members of our community. Secondly, to remove import duties from a range of luxury goods in order to create a free port. So, a free port, the whole idea of a free port was introduced in 1964-65, and thus attract more tourists. And thirdly, to produce additional revenue in order to meet the interest charges on our new loan commitment, about which I will be speaking later in this address. It is true that this last measure means a small increase in the cost of gasoline, cigarettes, and alcohol. Part of that known as the sin tax. Alcoholic beverages. So the cigarettes and alcoholic beverages, the sin tax, but we also was a rise in the price of gasoline, and there was an article by Mr. Broadbent in that regard about the price of gasoline as well. It says, but if we are to improve conditions in these islands by some economic development, we must have a jet airport and more tourists, and above all, we must not neglect the poorer members of our society in the process. Those same words can be echoed today in 2019. From the civil service to civil aviation is a natural progression up the alphabetical index. But the subject of the reconstruction of the runway at Owen Roberts Airfield has occupied much time and necessitated much effort in the past 9 months. This runway, built more than a decade ago, was not designed to cater for faster and heavier aircraft of the modern jet age. And by the beginning of 1964, the surface was showing every sign of rapid deterioration as a result of continual use by propeller-driven airliners and freight aircraft. By then, of course, one of the airlines which serves these islands has already announced its intention to introduce Boeing 727 airliners on this route early in 1965. And so the renovation of our runway became a matter of extreme importance and great urgency. These islands depend and will continue to depend on fast, reliable air service, not only for the transportation of our seamen and businessmen, but for the safe carriage of our tourists. Accordingly, the government showed no hesitation in dealing with this problem, though it realized that the cost of this project would be beyond our financial resources. In response to an urgent request, therefore, experts from the British Ministry of Aviation surveyed the runway, and after samples of the core of a runway had been subjected to tests in the laboratory of the Royal Aircraft Establishments at Cardington, the final report showed that our airfield runway would have to be reconstructed in order to cope safely with the Boeing 727 and similar jet transports. The cost of this work, including the provision of proper night lighting and other visual aids, was estimated at £350,000. Lots of money in those days. And Her Majesty's government, through the Secretary of State for the Colonies, generously offered us free grant of £200,000. So the Colonial Office gave us £200,000 to help with the runway, provided we could accept and service the balance of $150,000 in the form of a loan. I'm going to pause there for a second just to say the tight British weren't prepared to give us all of it. No, we're not giving you £350,000. We're going to give you $200,000 as a grant, but you have to come up with some money yourself. In a way, that is good. And I say that simply because it meant that the Cayman Islands people had some skin in the game as well. We had £150,000 of skin in the game, so that was part of our investment, and it meant, as a result of that we had, ownership, and we had paid in part for that ownership as well. So the administrator goes on to say a loan of this nature necessitates repayment at a rate of approximately £12,000 per year. And since it was necessary to show how the government of these islands intended to raise the additional revenue required to service this loan, a special meeting of this assembly was held on the 17th and 18th of December to discuss and to decide ways and means of raising this money. Now, I must say that this particular special meeting that was held, not only was it a special meeting, it was a secret meeting that people didn't know about. It was a secret meeting. People did not know about that this had been designed. That meeting had been set up to increase taxes on the people of the Cayman Islands, of course, for a good cause, but they didn't want it to come out because they weren't sure what the reaction would be to that. So, to have delayed this matter until the budget meeting would have meant an unnecessary delay. This is his excuse now for this meeting, special, and I will add secret meeting. This unnecessarily delay of 6 weeks, and in view of the urgency of this matter, it was a delay which we could not afford. At this special and secret meeting, so he goes on to admit that it was a secret meeting, so I sort of jumped the gun there a little bit because I knew what it was. So he says, at this special and secret meeting of this assembly, therefore, decisions were taken which will enable the government to service the loan of £150,000 from increased lighthouse dues, increased tonnage tax on our merchant vessels, and increased air landing charges, and by small increases of the duty paid on gasoline, cigarettes, and alcoholic beverages, the sin taxes, right? These increases, which were decided upon mid-December, became effective on the 1st of January 1965, and in the interests of the government revenues, it was necessary to take precautions to prevent a budget leak. A secret meeting to increase taxes on the people of the Cayman Islands, all done in secret. Could it happen in 2019? That is my question to you. Could a secret meeting to take place to increase fees, taxes on the people of the Cayman Islands take place in 2019? I will read more of this article when we return. We're going to take a commercial break, so please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back shortly.
Since March 2004, West Bay Pharmacy has kept their doors open to the local communities, even before, during, and after Hurricane Ivan. At West Bay Pharmacy, our staff provides so much more than pharmaceutical excellence. From the moment you walk through our doors to completing your cash out, our staff will have put your healthcare concerns at ease. We would like to take this moment to thank our loyal friends and customers. To us at West Bay Pharmacy, our patients are our primary concern. We provide thorough background checks and precise calculations to ensure your medical safety. Thank you for being a part of our family and for choosing West Bay Pharmacy, where we care about your health.
On Thursday at 12:15 p.m. on Radio Cayman, Health Service Station will bring you the next CI Retro Talk Today special Cayman Islands Cultural and Heritage Program presentation, which focuses on Celebrate Cayman, this year's Heroes Day theme. Health Service Station, Hell Road in West Bay, family owned and operated for over 45 years. Now that calls for a celebration. Health Service Station, where you're more than a customer, you're part of the family. Visit Health Service Station for all of your car care products.
At Kirk's Home Center, we can make your life much better. We got it all together. We got a great deal in store for you.
Did you make resolutions for healthier eating? Then weigh portions on a kitchen scale for $5.99 and make noodles of your favorite vegetables with a tabletop spiralizer for $36.09. Or try an indoor electric low-fat grill from Gotham for $39.05. Eliminate clutter and maximize space with a cubicle storage organizer for $68.49. And save on a 5-gallon wet-dry vac for only $55.99.
Kirk's Home Center. We got a great deal in store for you.
Initiating system.
For information that matter, For the Record with Orrett Connor continues right now on Radio Cayman.
Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. Reading from the Tradewinds newspaper, the budget speech that was given by the administrator. And I will continue here. It says, I am happy to report that some, if not all, of the information became, I can report that some, if not all, of the information became public knowledge shortly after this special meeting does not reflect well upon this assembly, ladies and gentlemen, and you may wish to pursue this matter later. So, you thought the Trump administration had leaks. We had leaks here in the Cayman Islands as well. So they leaked out the fact that this had taken place. And of course, I'm sure that there were members of the Legislative Assembly who didn't necessarily agree with the actions that were taking place, but went along with it, but made sure that it was leaked out to the public. There may be some who had interest as well, because remember now that some of these increases and our Legislative Assembly, to a certain extent, was controlled by the merchant class, and it would have had an effect on their bottom line, as well. Increased tonnage and stuff like that would have affected their bottom line. So no doubt that, someone, would have certainly leaked it out. So he goes on to say that he would hope that they would look into it. Says, however, to continue with the subject of our runaway reconstruction, I wish to express our gratitude to the British government for the grant of £200,000 for this major project. We in the Cayman Islands should perhaps be reminded that a gallon of gasoline costs about 6 shilling in Britain, where the consumer also pays £4 shilling and 10 pence for a packet of 20 cigarettes and £2 4 shilling and 8 pence for a bottle of scotch. By comparison, the prices we now pay for these and other commodities are indeed small, and we should continue to derive pride and satisfaction from the knowledge that we are financially less dependent on Britain than many of her larger dependencies. And we still remain that way as well, financially independent of them. But for some of our people, unfortunately, that doesn't mean a whole lot, because we are still bound by the UK in other ways, mental slavery, as well. So while we're free financially, we are mental slaves of the UK to a certain extent. I say that with no fear of contradiction, and some people may not like it, but that is the truth. Says the actual work of reconstruction of the runway will, of necessity, be a job for experts, but it is likely that it will provide some employment locally. And you heard Lennox, Lord Len, call in and talk about the fact that he worked, at the airport on the runway as well. Says some disruption of our air services seems inevitable while the work is to progress, but I am confident that close liaison between the airlines and the construction engineers and the airport manager will ensure that public inconvenience is kept to the minimum compatible with the demands of safety and the necessity for getting the work completed as soon as possible. Arrangements for the award of the contract are now being made by the Crown agents in London. So they loaned us, gave us $200,000, loaned us $150,000, and they awarded the contract. During 1964, a detailed engineering survey was made of sites suitable for the development of proper harbor facilities. Now we're getting into something different and talking about the harbor, folks. So he says, during 1964, a detailed engineering survey was made of sites suitable for the development of proper harbor facilities in Grand Cayman. The report on this survey was presented in December, and it is now being studied by the government with the object of deciding which of the sites recommended should be accepted. Once this decision is taken, it will be necessary to coordinate the site with plans for the development of bigger industrial and residential areas so that the developments of Georgetown and its environs can proceed in accordance with an overall plan. And we're still talking about town planning today. And here we are in 1965, 64, 65, talking about it as well. At the same time, the financial implications of this expensive but necessary harbor development will be studied with a view to ascertaining how it could be financed at some future date. Whilst I'm confident that our building problems will be overcome in due time, I am far less confident about the ability of the Cayman Islands to produce its own doctors, lawyers, civil servants, engineers, and other professionals professional men in the future. That's a little bit, that this wouldn't happen in the Me Too movement here in the throughout the world now. Talk about, let me repeat that for the women who are listening, right? He's less confident about the ability of the Cayman Islands to produce its own doctors, lawyers, civil servants, engineers, and other professional men. So the only doctors had to be men, lawyers had to be men, civil servants had to be men, engineers had to be men. Oh boy, you would catch hell if that speech was made these days. We need to take a break to do a voice message. We're going to go to a voice message that we received from one of our listeners. So I'm going to break there, but we're going to come back to that about the educational opportunities and facilities in the Cayman Islands.
Good morning, Mr. Connor. On behalf of Mr. Dwayne Seymour, the Honorable Dwayne Seymour Committee in Bordentown, we want to extend a big thank you to the Beautification Committee. Right now, we're getting the front page of our town clean, fences painted, and, little things like that done. And as the time goes by, we're going to be then working on the back roads, in the back roads of the town to get things done there. What we would like to do is persons who see areas in their on their road that needs tidying or needs the roadside that needs tidying or need a fence painted or mended or anything like that, is to call us at the MLA office in Bordentown. Mr. Dwayne is getting things done in a timely fashion, and we really appreciate that. The committee really appreciate what's getting done so far, and look forward to hearing from the public as to anything that they see that is needed. Thank you kindly.
Very good to know that. Sounds like Minister Dwayne Seymour is getting things done, clean-up committee and everything, in the absence of advisory district council's legislation being amended and put right, that something is being done, and good to hear that as well. So let's go back to the administrator's speech. He says, whilst I'm confident that our building problems will be overcome in due time, I am far less confident about the ability of the Cayman Islands to produce its own doctors, lawyers, civil servants, engineers, and other professional men in the future. Indeed, it is no exaggeration to say that these islands will forever be dependent upon the services of expatriates so long as our bright boys are permitted by their parents to forsake the classroom at an early age in order to obtain unskilled jobs at sea. I'm going to take a stop there for a second just to say that this was more of necessity than anything else, that men went to sea because someone had to provide for their families. Not only that, this administrator talks about this, but it fell on the shoulders of the United Kingdom government, because we were a crown colony, to provide quality education for us in the earlier years, in the 50s, in the 60s. You heard stories about teachers. My mother was a teacher. My mother had classes. She held classes under a breadfruit tree. You heard about Miss Kippy. You heard about Miss Rachel. You heard about Miss Izzy in West Bay. All of those places. The United Kingdom government did not provide us with the quality education that we needed at that point in time. So don't necessarily place the blame squarely on the shoulders of parents here who allowed their sons to go off to sea. That was done as a matter of necessity. It was necessary for them to do that, right? So it talks about forsaking the classroom at an early age in order to obtain unskilled jobs at sea. This problem requires urgent, serious, and prolonged attention by parents and educationalists in that order, because I would say not necessarily in that order, maybe educationalists first, or you should have said the British government, because the government cannot compel these boys to complete their secondary education and then avail themselves to the many opportunities available for higher education. I'm going to break there because we have to go to our headline news at 9 o'clock. And when we return, I will try to finish this. I want to talk about the creation of the PR Post, and I want to read Mr. Orrett Connor's letter to the editor as well. Please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back shortly.
Satisfaction is guaranteed 24 hours a day, whether it's music or information.
From Grand Cayman to Cayman Brac to Little Cayman, we've got you covered.
You ever hear a thing like that?
Radio Cayman in the Cayman Islands.
Radio Cayman. Radio Cayman's newsroom. These are the biggest stories right now.
A woman enters a guilty plea to a single count of obtaining property by deception after she sold a car that didn't belong to her. Vanessa Scott Carnegie admitted to selling the 2004 Honda Fit to a man for $2,000, even though she knew it wasn't hers to sell. She was released on bail and will return to court in February. Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta has said that a siege by suspected militants in Nairobi is over and all the attackers have been, quote, eliminated. Gunmen attacked the compound in the Westlands district of Kenya's capital on Tuesday, killing at least 14 people. Officials originally announced the end of the siege hours after it began, but gunfire and explosions were heard again early this morning. And a witness in a New York City courtroom has told authorities that former Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto accepted a $100 million bribe from drug cartel kingpin Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. He's accused of being behind the Sinaloa drug cartel, which prosecutors say was the largest U.S. drug supplier. 61-year-old Guzman has been on trial in Brooklyn since November after he was extradited from Mexico to face charges of trafficking cocaine. Those are your headlines. I'm Carsley Fuller.
Radio Cayman, the voice of the Cayman Islands. What's happening in your community? News and information, music and more. You can find us. www.radiocayman.gov.ky. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Radio Cayman is your choice, your voice for today's biggest news. Radio Cayman.
Initiating system.
For information that matter. For the record with Orrett Connor. Continues right now on Radio Cayman.
Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. No guests in the studio, so I'm reading from the Trade Winds newspaper. The administrator's budget speech. One of our listeners has corrected me and said it is runway, not runaway. But that's the old Cayman jargon. Just like you say you're going fishing rather than going fishing. So, if it comes out like that, that is not by accident at all. So the speech, he continues in his speech. Okay, coming to it. Just want to remind you that we have a caller on hold. Let's take the caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, Mr. For the Record. This is your friend Steve McPhee.
Morning and belated happy birthday to you.
Thank you very much, too. Thank you for that. Yes. Warwick, while I agree with you that the colonial office had the duty to administer the territory, I disagree with you about the education system.
Okay.
Because when you look at the history of the education system in Cayman, when you study it, when you drill down in it, you will see that was left to us. You will see that. But when we were a dependency of Jamaica, Jamaica did everything. Even before we were a dependency of Jamaica. Yes, after we dependency, before 1863, Michael Truss sent the school teachers here to educate our children. And the white class, those people who control the vestry and the vestry, would not allow the teacher to teach the colored children and the white children together. Study the history of the education. Andrew Malcolm was the first one. He was so frustrated because the first public school was in Borden Town, and he left and went back to Jamaica. And it took years before Panton was sent and McTaggart was sent here to teach school. It has always been a system where only certain people were supposed to be educated. Even in the 60s, as you talked about, if you look at the history, go to Founded Upon the Sea, and look at the history of education there. What it says there, what Crichton says, prominent families here, the same people that you read about who benefited from the who had an interest in the secret meetings to increase taxes. They were the same people who refused to vote for education for a school in Georgetown. They were the same people who refused to vote for a school in Georgetown, refused to take government money, our money that the taxes came from, to put a public school in Georgetown to educate people.
But Doc, don't you think with the UK as the colonial power that they, at the end of the day, had overall responsibility to see that those things happen? It goes to show you how little attention they paid, to us.
How many miles away they are? 6,000, 7,000 miles away to a little island. They don't give a damn about Cayman.
True.
They couldn't care less. They only care less now since money is there. There's other people brought their money and deposited here. They worried about it now.
Yep.
I'm talking about then. And while they were sending their children to the best schools abroad, while the merchant class were sending their children to the best schools abroad, those men that you talk about, that the report is talking about leaving the classroom to go to work on the ships, that is all they could do. They couldn't do anything else.
Yep.
The merchant class didn't allow them to do anything else. They were supposed to do that. You know how many fights I have with my family about not wanting to do that, about getting a good education and things like that. I was told, well, that's not possible. You're supposed to go and work on the ships to send home money and so forth. And the problem is that still exists today. That system still exists today, where only certain people are allowed to go and to get educated. And even if you get a profession, as you was reading before, even if you became a doctor or a lawyer or engineer or whatever it was, that still doesn't help you in Cayman. That still doesn't help you in Cayman. And whoever wrote that report the administrator is completely right. They will always be dependent on foreigners to help them to do it. I mean, they got it right back then.
Yep.
They got it right back
Yep.
then.
Yep.
They got it right back then. And it's our fault why we're in this position, because we never honored education. We thought that educated people were fools. When you hear a legislator get up into the legislative assembly and ridicule people like Roy Borden, who had spent so much time and effort and so much misery to go away to get a master's in education, and when they came back, they were ridiculed for that and put down. It's no wonder that people scared of education, educated people, and don't care about educated, and a lot of people now don't want to get educated because there is no end. There is no guarantee that you are going to be treated as an educated person and be accepted as a professional person as you would do in another country.
Yep.
And that's the reality. But what you need to do, Mister, for the record, you need to have a good session on the history of education in the Cayman Islands, so people can see what happened. Some of my great grand uncles were the ones who wrote to the Queen about trying to get educated in Bodden Town, and they were the ones who were part of the great exodus to Honduras, to the Bay Islands, and all those places because this place was futile. Nothing has changed.
Yeah,
it's worse now.
Yeah,
it's worse now because you don't need you now to be educated because they can buy the labor cheap from Asia and from other countries now, and it's even worse today. So we need to look at that really in depth and drill down in it, and so that we can share the information with our people.
Thank you very much for that, Doc. Yeah. So 54 years ago, Administrator talked about the fact that our reliance on expatriate workers, and here we are today about it as well. And when Dr. Markfield spoke about the fact that we should discuss the history of education in the Cayman Islands, and one of our listeners also suggested that this would be nice to include this person's in a discussion during this era, and it's something that we could probably do in celebrating older persons in the Cayman Islands as well, and I will seek to take up that person on that offer as well. Let's go back to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Happy New Year to you.
Many happy returns.
Thank you.
I was listening to Dr. McField, and I couldn't help but nod in assent to everything he was saying. But I want to add a little to this.
Okay.
So we have to understand that under colonialism, right, one of the drivers of colonialism was a racial prejudice. So the British, early in the colonial period, had identified the white colonies for independence: Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. The black territories they resigned had to be handled by a kind of benevolent dictatorship. And so the darker peoples were designed to be hewers of wood, hewers of stone, drawers of water, and carvers of wood.
Yep.
And so that's the situation with us. Now, when it came to Cayman, we were worse off even than Jamaica, because the merchant establishment here, and there is a story making the rounds in Bodden Town, which I heard from who I call the official Bodden Town historian, and my close relative Neville, about an argument between a vestryman and my granduncle, who was the vestryman at that time, Alfred Biddle Borden, and Mr. Logan, who was the justice. Logan was transporting Biddle, and there was a debate because it was proposed by one of the Georgetown White Merchants Establishment members to build a prison. When my granduncle and some other people of darker complexion said no, they wanted school, and Logan were transporting Biddle, and he was on the opposite side supporting the Georgetown merchants, and a fight ensued right down by Breadfruit Walk. And my uncle Biddle struck Logan, and mark you, they were cousins. But that bolsters Dr. McField's argument as to the merchant establishment and the position they held against education. And I'm a living example of people being persecuted because of their education. When my book comes out, God willing, and I have it already on hand, but I don't want to give you a copper too early because I don't want it out before a certain time.
Yeah, and and some people say, like, what they say about me, I'm no refrigerator, can't hold things.
Well, that's part of it too, but you said that. So, Mr. Connor, people that got dark of the skin, we always had a difficult, and when I came back, I found out that not only did the white merchant establishment and the near white people in Cayman society didn't understand education, they were suspicious of educating black folk. Now, you have to understand that I got my groundings in Jamaica at the famous institution of the Michael, of which they had schools here from 1863 right in Borden Town. And because of the racism, Malcolm, who was seconded, and the headmaster, because the white people didn't want their children to sit in classrooms alongside black children, Malcolm closed the school after 1 year and returned to Jamaica. And interestingly enough, it was the black descendant slaves who realized the value of education, and they petitioned. And this is a record in the archives. They couldn't sign their names because they were illiterate, but they signed the X asking for a school. Not the white folk, Mr. Connor, not the white folk.
Yep.
The black people, us, our ancestors. And so therein lies our history. I will leave the rest.
Thank you. Just one quick observation. When you talk about the British colonial system and the distinction made between the white colonies and the black colonies, notice the ones that had to resort to armed struggle to get their independence. Those were the ones, the black colonies, that had to do that because the Brits were not prepared to give it up freely.
Exactly.
Yep.
And Mr. McPhail is right about us here still being subjected to certain prejudices. And I can say this without fear of a successful contribution. That is why, thank God, I was determined to be an excellent president of UCCI.
And you did an excellent job, and we want to thank you for that as well. We have to go to a commercial break. We have one caller. We're going to ask that caller to hang in there. We will take your call as soon as we return from this short commercial break.
It's 2019, and you know what they say, new year, new me.
Yeah, Bobo. For me, it's new year, new car.
For real? What you thinking of buying?
The new RAV4 from Vant Motors. It's one of the safest compact SUVs out there with enough room inside, which is good for my family and convincing my wife we need this. Plus, it's fuel efficient, fun to drive, and on top of that, it's on sale too.
Yeah, and I hear it's one of the best-selling SUVs on the market.
Cause you don't gotta spend more to do more. That's why I'm gonna get mine now, while they have a new stock to select from.
Do more in your RAV4. Save thousands on the all-new 2019 RAV4. Test drive yours today and see why the RAV4 is a best-selling SUV in Cayman. Available only at Vant Motors, Walkers Road.
It was a day that changed my life. No words can describe the feelings of seeing my baby boy sick for the first time. The overwhelming feeling of fear to be responsible for his health and happiness became my priority. So I did what any nurturing mother would do when their baby is sick. I took him to get some of the best medicine possible.
CTMH Doctors Hospital Pharmacy understands the importance of careful decisions you make every day for your family. Our staff work towards healthcare excellence and providing the most current and up-to-date training with pharmaceutical care, so you can feel confident in knowing that your family is safe with the right medication. At CTMH Doctors Hospital Pharmacy, we take care of your health.
On Thursday, January the 17th at 12:15 p.m., you can hear CI Retro's Talk Today's special program presentation on Cayman Islands culture and heritage, focusing in on Heroes Day, celebrating Cayman. Brought to you by Atlantic Supply Limited, the Cayman Islands' foremost heavy equipment and construction equipment dealer since 1983. Atlantic Supply Limited, 398 North Sound Road in Georgetown. That's CI Retro Talk Today, Thursday, 12:15 p.m. on Radio Cayman.
Cayman Keswick 2019 will continue every evening at 7 o'clock until Friday, January 18th at the Cayman Islands Baptist Church in Savannah. The speaker this year is Stephen Jennings from Kingston, Jamaica. Lunchtime sessions are at the Family Life Center on Walkers Road each day from 12 until 12:50 p.m. You can join Radio Cayman each evening at 7 p.m. for a live broadcast from Cayman Keswick 2019. For more information, please visit www.caymankeswick.com. That's Cayman, KESWICK.com.
Initiating system.
For information that matters. For the record, with Orrett Connor, continues right now on Radio Cayman.
Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. We're on the last leg of the show this morning. One caller. Let's go to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Yes, good morning, O.C. How are you?
I'm good, Lord Lane. How are you? Morning.
Yeah, pretty good, man. It was very interesting listening to Dr. Steve and the Honorable
Roy Borden, yes.
Roy. Yeah, man. O.C., just a couple of notes I want to tell you about the airport.
Okay.
When I worked there, I worked actually with the company that called Lima and Trinidad.
Mm-hmm.
And it was another company that dealt a lot with the concrete and all the steel works and stuff. That was asphaltic.
Yes.
So it was like two companies sort of putting the airport together, you know. I worked on the Way Bridge. The Way Bridge is a place where, you know, the weight of the truck and the amount of bitumen or asphalt that is going on the runway. You understand?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, you know how much tarmac was laid, and you know exactly. Well, I didn't weigh the concrete part of it or the cement, but they also had a truck for that someplace on the runway itself. You understand?
Okay.
So, but getting back to the education system, you know, I really wanted to go to see because just about more than 3/4 of Georgetown I'd gone to see, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Because I also read a band and all of my buddies were gone. So I ended up from Miss Gleader School. I told my parents that I really wanted to go to high school, came out of high school behind the library. And they charged the system, the government system that time, education system, they had to pay £30 a year for every year that I attended the high school. You understand?
Yes.
So these days, that's not going on. But when I reached high school, maybe there's something, the amount of so-called black children or children of color that were there, you could count them on one hand.
Oh, I remember.
Huh?
I remember, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when you hear people talking about if parents didn't, at least not my parents, my mom wasn't interested in me going to see. She wanted me to get a good education. You understand?
Yes, yes.
So, you know, we already were in business having a bakery and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm,
so
mm-hmm.
I say, well, you know, something, I try to get a good education. And really, when I went to high school, I really got opened up to a lot of things. And through financial means, I just couldn't go back the year that I really wanted to go back. That was going up to where the school, John Gray High School is now.
Right.
But I'll tell you one thing, you know, the Cayman Islands High School had some real good teachers, I got to say that. And it was quite a bit of opportunities that one could take advantage of by attending or going to the library, you know, which I did every evening after school, you know. So the education system in the Cayman Islands could have been a lot better in those days had the people that were in charge taken upon themselves the responsibilities that they or commit themselves to the children. But it was a lot of prejudices that went on in those days, and it's still going on today.
Yep.
You know.
Yep.
It's a lot of nepotism that went on in the government in those days, and it's still there. It just is not as I would say forward is what it used to.
It's a little bit more subtle now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, but I mean, we could go on and go on all day. But something has to be done with the way how the system is running in Cayman Islands. There's so many people that is getting away with not murder, but I tell you the truth, it's so close to it, it's almost hard to disguise, you know?
Yep. Thank you very much, caller, for that. Thank you. Enjoy your day. I'm going to try to finish the rest of this speech before the close of the show. It goes on to say the government cannot compel these boys to complete their secondary education and then avail themselves to the many opportunities available for higher education. This is a matter for parental persuasion after consultation with the boys' teachers. A career at sea is an honorable calling, but there is no good reason why our brighter boys should sign on as cabin boys or unskilled deckhands when they could, after proper training, join the mercantile marine as junior officers. Well, I must say that a lot of those men who went on as deckhands and unskilled deckhands became chief engineers, chief mates, and captains as well. So that is where I would say that he was wrong with that. Says our girls, on the other hand, do well at school and in the universities and at our training establishments. But this is not enough because the future development of these islands cannot be assured until our young men can equal their sisters in the field of academic achievement. These islands cannot rely indefinitely on the services of expatriates and volunteers from abroad to fill government posts which no Caymanian is able to fill, either because he lacks the ambition to gain the necessary qualifications or because the duties are too arduous and the remuneration is too small. We need qualified Caymanian men who are prepared to devote themselves to the service of their people, and in return, this government must pay them salaries which will make these posts attractive. And it goes on to other things. But I want to try to find very quickly Mr. Warren Connolly's letter to the editor. Bear with me, Miss Susan. We're going to close off the phone lines at this point in time, too. So, okay, we got a voice note. Let's play the voice note while I find this, Miss Susan.
Mr. Connor, I have to totally agree with what Mr. Steve Macfield is saying, because that's very true. During the 60s, even in our district of Borden Town, prestigious children were given the opportunity to take exams, and the little colored children were not given those opportunities, and we were kept down. I can say it because I was there at those schools, and I knew what happened. I had to fight for my own self to get an education, because if I had to get one back then, it was a no-no. And I really couldn't understand why that was happening. But the few selected who were white-skinned, and I'm going to say it, I'm not going to hold that back. They were given the opportunities to take Jamaica examinations and all kind of other examinations. So I definitely agree with what Mr. Steve Macfield is saying. It's very true. And of course, it is being carried on today. I will also support that too.
Okay, we want to thank that caller. I'm going to read Mr. Warren Connolly's letter to the editor. Ms. Susan, you're going to have to give me a few minutes extra for that. It says, Sir, as this is my first correspondence to your paper, let me offer my congratulations on your undertaking in establishing a newspaper in these islands. I must, however, comment adversely on your first editorial, which was entitled Of the Future. I was amazed to see that the writer, while pretending to be some sort of magician capable of foreseeing the future, exposed his ignorance of the obvious past and present. It was distressing that at the very beginning of your venture, your trade winds blew in the direction that could be well described by the famous quotation, "Fools rush in where angels fear to tread." In my opinion, your article was incorrect and misleading. Who is advocating a constitutional change that has not been tried in any other country? That's a question. If I am correct, the proposal made is only the first step towards internal self-government. And by whom was that proposal made? By none other than the colonial office, and it can truly be said that Great Britain is leading her colonies forward. In leading her colonies forward, has the credit for the best policy in the history of nations. Would the British government agree to a change if, from its wide experience in dealing with the growth of its colonies, it did not feel a change would be for the welfare of these islands? Don't be too worried, Mr. Magician. I feel confident that the constitutional experts in London have also used their crystal balls. Don't be misleading. Constitutional change. Don't be misleading. Constitutional change is not the simple exercise of the whims and fancies of a few people, but the result of a chain of comprehensive study and negotiations between the colonial office experts and the people concerned. I notice from your last issue that your trade winds blew far offshore, for despite the recent cold wave over the North American continent, it blew as far north as Toronto, Canada, where Mr. Miller bit hook, line, and sinker for your misleading article, and has written lengthy thereupon. That would be Doran Miller of Radio Cayman fame as well. That's the Miller that he was referring to there. He says, I am convinced that Mr. Miller, though a Caymanian, knows nothing of our present constitution, and it would serve him well if he acquired a copy. Maybe he is more conversant with the Canadian history, and to that I refer him to Canada prior to the year 1850 and suggest that the unsatisfactory constitution which existed in Canada then is similar to that existing here. Well, it ignores... If ignorance of the legislators or the whims and fancies for personal gain of the few Canadians, why change was sought? Emphatically no. Mr. Miller states that the failings of our Constitution is the misrepresentation and application by legislators who require higher education. Yes, we lack higher education, but I say to Mr. Miller, it is better to say nothing and be thought a fool than to open one's mouth and remove all doubt. Is he comparing the Cayman Islands with Cuba? Has Cuba ever been a British colony? Then why the comparison? Mr. Miller, study history. Become conversant with steps to self-rule in British territories. Sincerely, W.W. Connolly, M.L.A. So that was Mr. Connolly's defense of the move towards internal self-government, and Mr. Doran Miller, who was residing in Canada at the time, article that he wrote in the newspaper. And in the interests of creating a balance, I will find the article that Mr. Doran Miller wrote and read that at another date and time. Folks, I want to thank you for allowing Radio Cayman and by extension For the Record into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. I also want to remind you that we are our brothers and our sisters keepers. There is always someone out there who's less fortunate than we are, and I ask you to extend a helping hand to them. If you can't do that, then I suggest you donate to a worthy charity, because we always want to consider those who need, not necessarily those who want or even those who crave. I say to you, have a great day. Continue to support your radio station, Radio Cayman. Join Sterling Dwayne Ebanks at 12:15 for Talk today. And as usual, we ask the good Lord to bless these three beautiful, wonderful Cayman Islands.
For the Record is brought to you by Vamped Motors, the only authorized Ford and Toyota dealership serving the Cayman Islands. And Cayman Pharmacy Group, with locations in West Bay and professional pharmacy at CTMH Doctors Hospital. The Cayman Pharmacy Group has a location for you just around the corner.